the opportunity to evaluate the work of DHS's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office and the Office of Health Security to assess their respective roles in preventing, mitigating, and responding to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, the Subcommittee on Emergency Management and Technology will review the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office and the Office of Health Security and examine their efforts to secure this great nation from weapons of mass destruction. I'd like to welcome our witnesses. Thank you for your work to protect this great nation from chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. We look forward to hearing from each of you. The Department of Homeland Security was created following the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, and brought together 22 federal agencies to coordinate and streamline efforts to protect our homeland. Shortly after the Twin Towers collapsed, a series of letters laced with anthrax were sent to congressional office buildings, news outlets, and postal facilities, killing 5 Americans and injuring 17. The 2001 anthrax attacks highlighted the means to which bad actors will go to terrorize innocent people and the need for the U.S. investment in CBRN security and defense. 23 years later, the risk of biological terrorism and weapons of mass destruction has not gone away. Recognizing the need to streamline and prioritize countering CBRN threats, the CWMD office was established in 2017 and authorized by Congress and President Trump in 2018. The mission of the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office is to reduce vulnerability and protect American cities from a WMD attack by supporting operational partners on the ground. For example, CWMD's Securing the Cities program has equipped state and local agencies with nearly 48,000 items and pieces of equipment with detection and deterrence capabilities to protect communities across this country from radiological threats. In October 2023, a Houston police officer discovered dangerous levels of radiation in a metal scrapyard after his STC-provided personal radiation detector detected radiation during his commute to work. The hazardous material was identified and safely removed. These capabilities are critical for safeguarding this great homeland. Last July, I attended the Securing the Cities annual conference, where emergency managers from across the country gathered for training and coordination. I was grateful to attend and proud of STC's work to fortify a network of state, local, and federal partners that are committed to defending the United States of America from a potentially catastrophic nuclear or radiological attack. In October, CWMD held a Chem Prep program in Nassau County to review local chemical incident-related concerns, gaps, and vulnerabilities to discuss potential opportunities to optimize local preparedness. I was very pleased with the local outreach and support to first responders on Long Island, the same island that members of this committee on both sides of the aisle, myself, Congressman Lilota, Congressman Garbarino, and now Congressman Swazi represent. With numerous bad actors and threats confronting our nation, CWMD has provided U.S. Customs and Border Protection with radiation portal monitors to scan cargo for potential threats. While the CWMD office plays an essential role in equipping state and local partners with equipment and training to counter CBRN threats, there are opportunities to improve the effectiveness of this office. Although the office was established to streamline internal DHS operations and coordinations with states and localities, many reorganizations have taken place, and workplace morale has consistently received low rankings by CWMD office personnel. When the Department of Homeland Security Act was passed in 2002, Section 872 allowed the Secretary to reorganize, establish, or consolidate operations within the department. In 2022, the Secretary used this authority to reallocate some health security and biosecurity functions to the newly created Office of Health Security. Less than 5 years since the Office of Health Affairs was reorganized into CWMD. Such constant restructuring can be confusing and frustrating for employees and stakeholders. I'm looking forward to learning more about the Office of Health Security, the benefit of his move out of CWMD, and differentiating between the biodefense work of OHS with that of CWMD. I am also eager to hear an update on CWMD's BioWatch program, which is a monitoring system that collects and tests air samples for biological agents that may be used in a bioterrorism attack. This program has not kept pace with technological advancements since it was first created in response to the 2001 anthrax attacks and requires 12 to 36 hours before successfully verifying a biological agent and warning the public. In 2019, DHS began a major acquisition program, Biological Detection for the 21st Century, BD21, to move toward the next generation of national biodetection. BD21 was intended to address some of BioWatch's limitations, including significantly shortening its time to detect. However, it seems that BD21 has been abandoned. The President's fiscal year 2025 budget request refers to the program as, quote, obsolete, and states that CWMD will transition into a new, quote, environmental biodetection capability development and maturation project. I would like to understand how this new project will be different. Ultimately, I hope that CWMD is on a fast track to finally obtaining the biological technology that America needs. Despite the obstacles the CWMD office has faced, I believe that we should work together to remedy these challenges and to help the office succeed in its mission of enabling operational partners in preventing WMDs from ever harming this great country. That is also why I was proud to introduce H.R. 3224, a bill to extend the authorization of this office, and I urge my colleagues in the Senate to take up this bill immediately. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on the opportunities and challenges confronting the CWMD office, as well as the Office of Health Security. Thank you all for this work in this field and for your commitment to this country. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman, and my good friend from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And good afternoon to our panel experts. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today to discuss the importance of countering weapons of mass destruction and the Office of Health Security. CWMD and OHS plays a critical role in fortifying our nation's defense against threats that can pose considerable harm to our communities. CWMD improves our nation's capability to plan for, detect, and guard against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. OHS is the central office that serves as the principal medical, workforce health and safety, and public health authority for some 260,000 Department of Homeland Security employees. Pursuant to CWMD Act of 2018, the office was set to sunset on December 21st, 2023, but the sunset was subsequently extended, and now it's set to expire when the continuing resolution expires, which is on this Friday. I want to thank my friend and Chairman D'Esposito for working in a bipartisan manner in front to reauthorize CWMD. I'm proud to co-sponsor his bill, H.R. 3324, the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Extension Act of 2023. As authorizers, we should do our part to make sure that all programs and offices have support, and there is no question as to whether this office or any other office that protects the nation from threats has an uncertain future. We should always, our number one job is to make sure that we properly fund and provide the resources to keep America safe. Notwithstanding whatever party or philosophical views we may have, this is in fact one of the most significant bipartisan issues that we have to undertake. CWMD operates critical programs like securing the city's STC, which provides 14 local governments, including my hometown. I was proud to be the lead sponsor on this bill, and I know, Ms. Callahan, that you had the opportunity to visit New Orleans to do a walkthrough, so I hope you had a chance to enjoy the weather, the food, and of course, the warm hearts of the people of New Orleans. My hometown with detection equipment training, exercise support, operational and technical subject matter expertise, and programmatic support is so critically important to making sure that things like the Super Bowl and Mardi Gras and high populated activities are safe, not just in New Orleans, but across the country and certainly in the other 14 cities that are part of the STC. STC is working with New Orleans to prepare for the Super Bowl. We continue to support important events like Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, Sugar Bowl, any other reason. We have millions and millions of people who visit New Orleans for their the hospitality and the wonderful access to transportation and our world-class convention center. Shameless plug there, but we're also obviously very excited about having this extra barrier of protection because we know the threats are in fact real. I introduced H.R. 443, the Securing the Cities Improvement Act, which passed the House earlier this month. My bill will help cities build and maintain their security capabilities against nuclear or radiological threats. I look forward to discussing the STC's impacts on domestic preparedness. While CWMD is doing great work, one concern that I have seen highlighted repeatedly in the Partnership for Public Service and the Government Accountability Office, GAO, report is internal morale issues. One GAO reports highlighted the merger of predecessor offices under CWMD caused low morale and that the office's missions were unclear under the new structure. Some employees had difficulty understanding how their missions should align under the new structure. However, a more recent GAO report has highlighted that CWMD is working on its workforce morale. I want to thank GAO for their work on helping the committee understand how this new office is functioning. I look forward to hearing today from CWMD how you have improved your workforce morale. OHS is also an integral part of the department and was formerly part of CWMD until 2022. As a separate component, OHS optimizes the health, wellness, and safety of the DHS workforce and enhances efforts to counter health threats that pose risk to our nation. In recent years, they have managed medical and public health initiatives to help thousands of people resettling in the United States through Operations Allies Welcome and Uniting for Ukraine. It is imperative to recognize and support the critical work carried out by both CWMD, and OHS in securing our homeland. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today regarding the recent fiscal year 2025 budget request and any additional concerns and successes the office would like to discuss. We're here to serve. We're here to hear from you. We're here to determine how we as a committee can do more to make sure that your jobs are easier to do and that you're funded to do the things that you are constitutionally mandated to do, and that is to make sure that we have a safe and wholesome community. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Other members of the subcommittee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I am pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this very important topic critical to our national security. I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. Thank you. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. The Honorable Mary Ellen Callahan serves as the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. CWMD leads DHS efforts to safeguard the United States of America against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Previously, Ms. Callahan served as the Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of the Department. Dr. Herbert Wolf is the Acting Chief Medical Officer and Acting Director of the Office of Health Security for DHS. He oversees the medical, public health, and workforce health and safety activities across the department. Prior to the establishment of OHS, he served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health Security within CWMD. Dr. Tina Wan Sherman is a director in the Government Accountability's Office, Homeland Security, and Justice team. She oversees work on the protection of the nation's critical infrastructure assets, the security of the United States transportation system, and additional equities within the Department of Homeland Security, including the CWMD office. I thank all the witnesses for taking the time and being here with us today. I now recognize Ms. Callahan for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman D'Esposito, Ranking Member Carter, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office and our efforts to safeguard the nation from chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats, also known as CBRN. The DHS CWMD office has a unique value proposition in the CBRN space. CWMD was created by Congress 5 years ago to be a single point of CBRN expertise within DHS. We are the hub for the department's Weapons of Mass Destruction, or WMD, CBRN activities, providing coordination, strategy and policy guidance, intelligence analysis, operational support, and researching technologies. With your support, the creation of an office solely focused on CBRN threats streamlined the ability of DHS to resource and execute this critical mission. My priorities for the office include focusing on the outstanding CWMD employees and bolstering our relationships with our important state, local, and federal partners. I've been leading CWMD for 8 months. The workforce at CWMD is among the most talented, mission-focused, and knowledgeable workforces I have ever experienced. At its founding, however, the office faced challenges, including frequent leadership changes, faltering morale, and staff turnover. Therefore, my first priority at CWMD is to further build a collaborative, safe, and productive work environment. The CWMD team deserves this. With that said, the uncertainty around CWMD's future has had a devastating effect on the morale and retention of the office's highly skilled and in-demand workforce. My employee morale and well-being plan has 3 elements. First, we've been encouraging professional development, including individual development plans and professional training. We've just launched a mentoring program where I am among the mentors. Second, we are working to better integrate the activities of each of the 5 directorates to make sure that the CWMD staff has complete awareness of the office missions. As a result of education and communication, I've seen better synergies and coordination between and among the directorates, which leads to a more engaged workforce. Third, we are looking for ways to connect with our colleagues on a more personal note. We host quarterly in-person get-togethers and are establishing interest groups. I hold weekly office hours to engage with the workforce one-on-one. All of these actions are playing a significant role in improving CWMD's employee morale. However, without enduring reauthorization, CWMD will likely face steady attrition. In addition to better integrating my office, I'm committed to strengthening our assistance to and our relationship with our stakeholders, including our state, local, and federal partners. CWMD has integrated the prevention and detection of all CBRN threats with our DHS partners through training, equipment, and technical assistance to CBP, HSI, TSA, Coast Guard, and Secret Service. We also serve as a peer organization to CISA and FEMA in the life cycle of CBRN incident management. We, of course, work seamlessly with our colleagues at the Office of Health Security on public health and biological threats. I'm working to further integrate the operational support of all of these components with our planning, research, and support work at CWMD. Even with all this federal activity, the most unique role CWMD plays in the CBRN ecosystem is our relationship with state and locals. CWMD provides radiological and nuclear detection capabilities in 14 high-risk regions in the U.S. through the Securing the City programs. Those regions are preparing to work seamlessly with the FBI and the Department of Energy in the event of an incident. On Monday, as I was in New Orleans, along with Representative Carter's team and the FBI and DOE, in order to see a portion of the CBRN preparation for the 2025 Super Bowl, along with city and state teams. Last year, Securing the City trained over 14,000 state and local first responders. Our BioWatch program is in over 30 jurisdictions. We are working to update our environmental biodetection capabilities, all while providing steady state coverage for these jurisdictions. Between Securing the City and BioWatch, CWMD provides steady state detection for 40% of the population. For the rest of the country, our mobile detection deployment team was deployed 188 times last year, providing support in 48 states, 2 territories, and 1 tribal unit. All of this work with our stakeholders is intended to prepare and promote collective readiness and to safeguard the nation from CBRN threats in the homeland. Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Ms. Callahan, and thank you for your work. I now recognize Dr. Wolf for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman D'Esposito, Ranking Member Carter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the great work being done by the dedicated personnel of the Office of Health Security, or OHS. It's truly an honor to be here today to talk about the work that we are doing. I have served as the Acting Chief Medical Officer and Acting Director since January of 2023, and prior to that as the Deputy Chief Medical Officer and Deputy Director since the office creation in 2022. I joined the department in 2019 after nearly 30 years of federal public service. The challenges of the past 5 years exemplify how nearly every Homeland Security threat has a health security nexus. From acts of terror to a global pandemic, surges in migration, cyber attacks directed at critical infrastructure, including healthcare, natural disasters across the country to international response efforts spanning nearly every continent, DHS is at the center of it all and often operating as the lead federal agency. To answer the enduring health security challenges we face, DHS established OHS in July of 2022 to serve as the principal medical, workforce health and safety, and public health authority for DHS. The dedication of our staff and our earnest response to these challenges reflect the earnest or enduring impact, hope, and vision of OHS, one that is grounded in agility, subject matter and technical expertise, deep relationships with our interagency and state and local partners, and an unwavering commitment to the physical and mental health resiliency of our workforce in the nation. Today, OHS positions the department to have a proactive, unified, and robust response to the ever-evolving health security landscape. Health security is, after all, a core tenet of Homeland Security. The over 260,000 dedicated men, women, and working animals of the department work tirelessly to secure the nation from the many threats we face. The office that I'm privileged to lead, which is comprised of exceptionally talented medical, public health, and workforce health and safety experts, collaborates with leaders from across the department, the interagency, and with our state and local partners to strengthen the nation's health security while providing for a safer and healthier DHS workforce. Health, after all, is our greatest possession, and I'm proud to serve alongside many who are leading and championing the physical, mental, and work-life health of the DHS workforce, including those on the front line. Those in the workforce that we serve include 90,000 frontline law enforcement officers and agents, 44,000 U.S. Coast Guard uniformed members, 4,000 EMTs and paramedics, 640 United States Public Health Service Commission Corps officers, 60,000 civilian employees who are veterans, and 4,000 four-legged employees of the department. We also provide leadership and oversight of DHS medical and public health policy, standards of care, and healthcare services provided to non-citizens, ensuring the delivery of high-quality care to those in our custody. I stand in awe and am humbled by the commitment of my OHS colleagues. I've had the privilege to lead them as we mobilize to stand up our domestic public health measures in response to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, to deploy to the southwest border to provide technical public health assistance and implementation of care improvement actions, to build on the lessons learned from Operation Allies Welcome, to work tirelessly with our partners on the Food Security is Homeland Security mission, to plan for and enable better preparedness and response to the health and medical impacts of CBRN, to ensure we optimize mental health and wellness resources for our workforce, to leverage research and development and academic partners to develop approaches to known and novel health threats, to harness technology to provide high-quality data and analysis to program managers and decision makers, and last but not least, to assist our EMTs and paramedics on missions around the United States, and so much more. Chairman, ranking member, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the incredible, talented, and dedicated team at OHS that works at the intersection of health security and homeland security, as well as all the public health, medical, and workforce health and safety teammates across the department, we thank you for your support. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf. I now recognize Dr. Sherman for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman D'Esposito, Ranking Member Carter, member of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me today to speak on behalf of my agency, the U.S. Government Accountability Office. The intentional use of chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons remain real-world threats for those domestically and abroad. The risks posed by those weapons are significant, and each one is unique in terms of their ability to be detected, prepared for, mitigated, and recovered from. 5 years into its existence, the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office carries out the difficult mission of enabling operational partners at the federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial levels to promote the readiness for and prevention of the use of weapons of mass destruction against the United States. The last time GAO testified about CWMD in front of this committee in 2021, we reported that the office needed to help integrate and coordinate the department's chemical defense activities. CWMD has efforts underway to identify and harmonize those activities across the department. This is even more critical given the stoppage in chemical security inspections resulting from the lapse in authorization for DHS's Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Program. We also told this committee that CWMD faced information gathering and collaboration challenges as part of the National Biosurveillance Integration Center. NBIC has since enhanced its ability to collect information using open source data, and most of the stakeholders we recently spoke with found value in its written products. However, NBIC could take additional steps to assess the support it provides to its FSLTT partners. At that time, we additionally highlighted continued problems with BD21, the acquisition program to replace the existing BioWatch early warning system, such as the technical readiness and feasibility of the technologies for the program, given the inherent limitations and uncertainties for use in biodetection. With the BD21 acquisition now canceled, CWMD will need to forge a new path forward to replace the 20-year-old BioWatch system still operating in major metropolitan areas nationwide. We also at the time shared with the subcommittee that the Securing the Cities program, which provides equipment and training for first responders, had not clearly communicated potential program changes to or address risks to sustain detection capabilities for the program. In the latest report GAO is issuing today, we found that CWMD has improved in these areas and recommended it better communicate expectations and measures to participants for how the office will assess them against their new implementation plan next fiscal year. Lastly, we reported in 2021 that CWMD's workforce had continued to experience low morale following the merger of its two predecessor components that held differing missions, expertise, and cultures. It has since also undergone another reorganization to establish the Office of Health Security, this all without permanent leadership. CWMD now has that leadership with Assistant Secretary Callahan and is continuing to take steps to strengthen employee engagement despite the uncertainty tied to CWMD's reauthorization. We remain hopeful that CWMD will remain responsive to GAO's recommendations as we continue to provide oversight support for the subcommittee and clearly demonstrate its effectiveness in meeting its mission across the range of threats it was established to address.
Thank you, Doctor. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. My first set of questions is for Ms. Callahan. As I mentioned in my opening statement, Section 872 of the Homeland Security Act of 2002 allows the department to reorganize, establish, or consolidate operations. This authority was used to establish the CWMD office in 2017 and then used again by the Secretary to establish the Office of Health Security in 2022. In your opinion, have the CWMD and OHS office reorganizations been successful?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I believe both reorganizations have been successful. With regard to the CWMD office, in the first instance, that was subsequently was authorized in 2018. Bringing together all threats, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear, was crucial. It's important. It mirrors what other agencies are doing, and it brings together all elements to bear. It also helps support our operational components as well as our state and local stakeholders. With regard to the Office of Health Security, I'll defer to Dr. Wolf if he thinks it's a success.
That'd be great.
Could I, but I will
course.
say, yeah, I will say, I think that having the Office of Health Security outside of CWMD helped clarify several lanes. Obviously, they do public health, health security, we do biological threats. We work together seamlessly. Sometimes OHS takes the lead, sometimes we do. But I think getting the medical expertise outside of the office helps clarify the OHS's role within the department. Over to you, Dr. Wolf.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Chairman, related to the establishment of OHS, prior to the establishment, when CWMD was created, it only took approximately half of the medical and public health folks in the department. The remaining folks that focused on the health of the workforce went to the management directorate under the Chief Human Capital Officer. As we progressed through the second and third year and then entered the pandemic, we learned that the medical and public health and workforce health and safety expertise was very small compared to a department that has 260,000 employees. So one of the great benefits of the OHS 872 was bringing together all the public health and medical activities of the department under one office and under one leadership.
Okay, and as we've heard, sometimes the workforce, the dedicated workforce that are affected by these changes, the morale has been not so great. It's been one of the things that we as a committee have wanted to address. So in addition to the morale, and I guess if you could just touch upon why you think that's a factor, what other challenges have we seen in the reorganization or the consolidation when decided by Secretary Mayorkas?
For health security?
It's really the same question for both of you.
Yep. The employee morale, as I mentioned, I have 3 tenets: work on professional development, work on understanding the mission and how you fit into that mission and how you can advance, and then third, getting to know people on a personal level to reestablish esprit de corps. I think those are important elements. I also think transparency is crucial. That is one of my philosophies. I have fortnightly town halls. I write a column every week in the bulletin. I try to be available. I have one-on-one offices to go and make sure they know what's going on and that we can be transparent. I will note my one last challenge is the threat of termination, what weighed heavily on us in the fall, and we can speak about that later. Yep. Herb.
Yeah, Chairman, one of the benefits we had at OHS is we got to do the 872 second after CWMD, and so one of the things we could do even prior to the establishment is use GAO best practices and learn from other federal reorganizations. So we have not had the same challenge when it comes to morale. Few things that we've done. One is employee engagement. We've done a monthly survey prior to the establishment. We continue that today. The second thing we've done is we do a monthly all hands. The last thing is our monthly pulse survey and the FEV scores, which is the first time in 2023 that OHS was its own office, mirror relatively good scores. Our employee engagement and our employee experience index is above 75. We've had greater than 90% of the surveys in FEVs had a score greater than 74%. And then lastly, in the FEV score, we had several that were above 90, and those I think are attributed to medical folks have a few core inherent missions. First, do no harm, and secondly, to help those that are in need. And so there was a real attrition in there for that. To your question on challenges, I think the one we continue to face is just the enduring mission of DHS and making sure that we communicate to the team that we've got several communities to serve, those in our custody, the workforce, and the nation as a whole.
Okay. All right, thank you, Doctor. My time has expired. I now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned earlier, I find it concerning that the uncertainty surrounding the reauthorization of CWMD, along with the reports of low morale, can be affecting staff retention and the effectiveness of CWMD's mission. Assistant Secretary Callahan, can you speak to how the reauthorization's uncertainty has impacted CWMD's employees and what long-term extension or sunset repeal would mean for your office?
Thank you, Ranking Member. The threat of termination for the office created a great deal of uncertainty. It also created a distraction in the office in the fall. I ended up losing 10% of my staff, which equaled over 380 years of CBRN experience, federal experience. That is a real loss. We are working quickly to replace them, but it would be difficult to recruit the talented and in-demand workforce to ask them to come and join when we have, again, the potential of a threat of termination in 2 years hence. Also, with regard to our state and local partners, they experienced and expressed to me anxiety about the threat of termination. And of course, several of them are working towards the 2026 World Cup. And when I was in Boston and in New York recently, both of them asked about termination and looking forward. It is a concern. It is weighing on us. And as I said, this is an incredibly talented and mission-focused office.
And it's unfair to ask anybody to work under these uncertain terms. We have experts that are recruited to go other places. The talent pool is, particularly in specified areas like this, very thin. So we should always endeavor to give the security of our agencies the privilege and the authority to know that you will be able to continue to be funded and operated. I'm happy to hear that you say that. I know my colleagues are listening, and we will continue to endeavor to do just that, to fully fund and give you the security to be able to secure us.
Thank you.
CWMD, Securing the Cities, STC program provides funds for 14 local governments to counter successful deployment of nuclear and radiological weapons in the U.S., including my hometown of New Orleans. However, the program is limited to high-risk urban areas designated by FEMA, which can create uncertainty for local governments participating in the program. As you know, I introduced H.R. 4403, the Securing the Cities Improvement Act, which will provide more stability for STC participants. I was pleased that the bill passed the House earlier this month. Assistant Secretary Callahan, could you explain why this bill is critical for the securing of cities and programs, more importantly?
Thank you, Representative. We support decoupling the securing the cities, high-risk urban areas from the FEMA designation of UASI because it's CWMD grants. We can evaluate the threats and the CBRN risks as we did with New Orleans, and we support having that flexibility to identify potentially new high-risk areas that may be included going forward.
Dr. Wolf, real quickly, are OHS and CWMD preparing for emerging biological threats? If so, how?
Ranking Member, thanks for the question. Certainly, I believe that we are more prepared today than we were several years ago, but challenges remain. CWMD and OHS share a great relationship and a partnership. Few of the areas where I would say that we have done great are looking at emerging threats and forecasting, but whether that is deliberative or whether that is unintentional. Second area we've done a great job in the biological realm is in the food, agriculture, and veterinary threat, both to food security as well as to the agriculture sector. Lastly, an area of concern that is shared across the federal interagency is we've got a very taxed and strained public health and medical workforce. Most of you know, hospitals run at almost capacity and run day-to-day on a tight operating budget. Post-COVID, we've learned that the health and medical workforce is resilient, but they're also vulnerable. And so one of the areas that I share as a challenge is being sure that we are prepared, investing in the workforce, so we're prepared for the next potential public health or biological incident.
Thank you, Dr. Sherman. I've got just a few seconds left, but I'd love you to, first of all, thank you all for your incredible service. What's your greatest fear, and what should we know as a committee to help you allay those fears?
When it comes to the countering of weapons of mass destruction in office? I think the main, I'm not sure if I characterize it as fear, but I think one area of concern, we'd like the office to continue to focus on demonstrating its effectiveness. There are a lot of activities and efforts underway, and the office has demonstrated.
Let me real quickly, if one thing kept you awake at night, one thing that we, as a member of Congress, can do, this committee more specifically, can do for you and your agency to make your life and our lives more safe. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield after she answers.
All yours.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have a single fear that I can communicate, but I definitely feel that CWMD in particular has an important mission, and we definitely want to make sure to continue in support of the subcommittee, monitor its activities.
So you just had a blank check in front of you. You didn't fill it in.
Happy to speak further about the work that we've done in this particular office. I think one of the kind of main focuses we have is these threats are real, as I said in my opening statement, and we are concerned about how the federal government is taking steps across not only within the Homeland Security enterprise, but across the federal government and across nationwide to be able to help address those threats. And one of the challenges that we feel is experienced as a result is the fact that there needs to be, again, a coordination, a real understanding of the range of threats to make sure that there aren't any specific capability gaps that exist, as a result of the efforts that are underway. And we would like to continue to work to ensure that CWMD is helping to identify those gaps across the federal government as well as with SLTTs to be able to address those threats.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ranking Member. And I just want to point out, really to Ms. Callahan's point, and I think to concerns of all of you, the bill that, my bill that came out of this committee and then passed full committee in a bipartisan fashion. So I think that shows the commitment that this committee and this subcommittee has to the work that you do. It was actually a 7-year extension. But due to the CBO score, we also have to be realistic in what we could actually, as a committee and a subcommittee, can get onto the floor and pass. So that's why we're at the 2-year number. But this committee, and my bill, when it was originally drafted, did have a 7-year extension. And with that, I recognize my good friend and fellow New Yorker and Long Islander, Mr. Lalota, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman D'Esposito, for your leadership and to our witnesses for being with us here today. Like Chairman D'Esposito, I am a proud New Yorker, a proud Long Islander, and I'm honored to represent the east end of Long Island. My district's about 50, 60 miles to the east of Manhattan, the heart of New York City. And this coming September 11th marks the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks in Lower Manhattan, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and here at our nation's capital. And after that day, we as a nation collectively vowed that we would never forget, that we would never allow another attack of that magnitude on American soil. However, Mr. Chairman, I'm becoming increasingly concerned that we are on the cusp of another major attack, and if we do not properly prepare, we could fail to prevent another 9/11. In fact, the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee back in December and warned Congress of another 9/11-like failure. During that hearing, he said, I quote, "I see blinking lights everywhere." And ask any New Yorker, we know what that means, and we'll tell you plain and simple that we're in trouble. And now, in addition to being a proud New Yorker, I'm a Navy veteran, the brother of a Marine, and I served this country in uniform with immense pride for 11 years. And I can tell you from that experience, the most effective way to thwart an adversary and protect an asset, especially our people, is through deterrence. The action of discouraging an action or an event by instilling doubt or fear into the consequences. Assistant Secretary Callahan, thanks so much for being here. As the Assistant Secretary for the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office, my first question is for you. It was only 5 years ago that the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office within the Department of Homeland Security was established. Do you believe that the office has served as a deterrent for our adversaries in attempting to use a weapon of mass destruction on U.S. soil since the office was created?
Representative, I do believe it has served as a deterrent, and the way it has done so is by pushing out training, equipment, and exercises to the state and local first responders. They're going to be the ones who are going to come across a chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear threat, and getting training and technology in their hands is how that we can not only identify, but prepare and respond. Our mission is to prevent and detect and deter CBRN threats, and I think we're doing so with regard to our relationship with state and locals, also in Nassau County as well as in Suffolk County, sir, and also with working with our operational components here in the Department of Homeland Security, and then working in the interagency with FBI and DOE. Yes, sir.
Great. And I know that Dr. Sherman resisted the temptation to answer the question about the blank checks, and then you referenced...
I'll write it.
You're going to get a shot at the same question then. How can you build on that success? In your answer just now, you said technology was a key part of what we ought to be focused on moving forward. Give Congress a sense of what else you think we ought to be leveraging in technology and otherwise to be able to build on the success of the last 5 years.
Sir, it's technology, training, and equipment and exercises. Getting the knowledge out for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear threats, understanding how to respond, do the training and exercises that I witnessed in New Orleans just this week, because it's the first responders, it's those state and locals who are going to be on the ground if indeed something happens. And we are working to get that knowledge out as far as we can. With regard to the check that I will write, the enduring reauthorization of the CWMD office is crucial to make sure that we can be that linchpin for the entire CWMD ecosystem.
Thank you. Appreciate your feedback. This committee under Chairman Diaz-Bazito's leadership has a strong bipartisan approach to how
We are
we
very
ought to-
grateful.
And we're going to continue that. We're committed to doing that.
Thank you.
Going to maybe go to a next round in the future, Mr. Chairman, so I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Lorda. I now recognize from Alabama and first responder, Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. I appreciate our witnesses for being here to discuss the important work each of you are doing to secure our nation against weapons of mass destruction. As you all know, BioWatch is one of the programs used to carry out the mission of the CWMD office by collecting and testing air samples for biological agents likely to be used in an act of bioterrorism. As technology evolves, so do threats to our country. For example, increasing access and affordability of unmanned aircraft presents ample opportunities for bad actors to cause harm and hysteria in our communities. Now more than ever, we depend on efficiency and effectiveness of BioWatch. Unfortunately, this program is not operating like it should. From breakdowns to accurate information sharing to bureaucratic barriers and lagging procurements of biodetection technology, DHS has fallen dangerously behind. For this reason, I introduced the DHS Biodetection Improvement Act, which would direct DHS to use every tool in its disposal to develop an acquisition and procurement plan to meet the biodetection needs of the 21st century. The House passed this legislation earlier this month, and I urge my Senate colleagues to do the same. First, Assistant Secretary Callahan, to what extent is BioWatch an operational program given past findings of its inaccuracy in timely detection, and what plan exists for improving it?
Thank you, Representative Strong. BioWatch is the only biodetection capability that this nation has. It has existed. It is a stable and functional process. We are working on improving it and looking at technology and opportunities, but it is lab-based, lab-proven, and we've worked with over 30 jurisdictions to make sure that we have an appropriate baseline and security. BioWatch is reliable, sir.
Thank you. How long does it take from the moment a sensor registers a bioagent to when the data is shared with partners for response?
Yes, sir. The materials for BioWatch are collected either on a 12 or 24-hour basis and then are analyzed in the lab. From the time in the lab, it takes a few hours, somewhere between 2 and 4 hours, to identify whether or not there is aerosolized biological materials in the air.
12 to 24 hours, right?
That is for the collection time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. When dealing with the threats of bioterrorist attack, every minute matters, every second matters.
Yes, sir.
And the Chairman Diaz-Bazito highlighted it can take up to 36 hours to get these results. How many times since the start of this program has there been a positive detection, and how many times has there been a false alarm?
In this room, sir, I cannot go into details, but I can talk about it in a different room if that would be, happy to take that offline if that's okay.
Thank you. Dr. Sherman, thank you for your work on reports related to BioWatch. I understand that GAO has made multiple recommendations about changes that needs to be made to the acquisition and procurement process. Has DHS implemented any of those changes?
Yes, DHS has taken steps to better inform its acquisition process. And in fact, I think the result of BD21, the BD21 program being canceled, was informed in part by some of the questions that we had raised in prior work and recommendations that we had made regarding more informed decision-making during the acquisition process and not moving forward with that process and spending additional funds until there's really kind of clear evidence and documentation of effectiveness.
Thank you. Other than passing the DHS Biodetection Improvement Act, what is the biggest thing DHS can do right now to improve BioWatch in your judgment? What's the biggest thing they can do to improve biodetection?
I will say,
BioWatch?
I'll say biodetection is an incredibly challenging task. And, you know, we're talking about how long it takes to be able to capture a sample and test it and confirm results. You know, the extent to which there is a way to identify technologies that allow for increased efficiencies in those timeframes. If those exist, then that is, you know, that would be something that I think would result in a you know, significant progress. But CWMD, given its current mission, you know, should be actively considering, as it is, how to continue their focus in biodefense.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, you touched on it just a second. It is unique that you worked as a fire chief. I've been a fire chief, police, first responders. We know firsthand how critical that is, that we get that information. 40 years myself and 34 years as an emergency medical technician. So it's so critical to our first responders, and I thank each of you for what you do to get that information as fast as possible. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. And I recognize from Oklahoma, Mr. Keene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask Dr. Sherman, representing the GAO with a Homeland Security specialty, tell me, in terms of efficiency is something that GAO is respected for constantly analyzing, where do you see resources being expended that the GAO would say may be inefficient and could be otherwise allocated? I'm really interested in the concept of the electric grid and hardening our transformers. I'd like to hear if you think that we're being inefficient in some areas, and if some of those resources could be otherwise utilized to protect what I think is a very vulnerable grid.
Sure. So speaking to the acquisition piece, CWMD has gone through not only in the biodefense space, but also in the radiation detection space, several acquisitions that have resulted in cancellation. And I think I mentioned it before, that's actually not necessarily a bad thing, because if it comes to a decision point where the office or the department decides that they don't have enough information to move forward and to spend the taxpayer dollars for a particular program, that they should make a decision to not do that. So that is an area where I think the office has at least taken steps and demonstrated that the again, the kind of the efficiency piece is really critical in making sure that there isn't continued efforts over time and spending to be able to identify particular threats. I would also say one of the themes that we have throughout the CBRN space for CWMD is going back to the message about effectiveness, really understanding whether the programs and activities are working, whether the work that, in the case of securing the cities, the partners that are being carried out in the regions, having an understanding of whether or not the support that CWMD is providing, the money, the resources, is actually working and better protecting those regions across the country. And so I think that that is a way to really understand whether or not money is being well spent as it goes towards the various programs within CWMD.
Can you expound upon that? So the expenditure of funds going to localities, high population areas. How is GAO determining whether or not that is a good spend for the taxpayer? How do you run through how do you analyze that accurately?
Sure. So in the case of securing the cities, for example, last year, CWMD put out an implementation plan for its program, a new version of its implementation plan. And as part of that plan, the office was to collect information from the regional partners in terms of trainings, exercises, detections, efforts that they have made that have been tied to the resources that they've been provided to them. We have found that CWMD over time hasn't done as good of a job looking at that information, collecting that information, making sure that it's accurate through quarterly reporting requirements and others. And so in this report that we issued today, we made recommendations around making sure that it has better data, it has better information from those partners to be able to say, okay, you are successful in the efforts that you're carrying out, being able to implement this program, being able to be prepared as a first responder for detection efforts, and you should be able to continue forward and ideally obtain sustainment funding as a result of that.
So I want to, because I got 40 seconds left, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask in regards to the expenditure, and next year we'll come back and have a conversation as to whether or not those suggestions from GAO were implemented. What are your thoughts, Ms. Callahan, in regards to is there a better allocation of resources that may not be high population centers regarding our electric grid, the transformers? My understanding, there's some information floating around that says we have 20 transformers that if they were all hit at the same time, whether it's gunfire, an EMP, somebody walking up with a device that exploded, then we could bring down our entire electrical grid, shut down traffic, shut down cell phone utilization. Can you speak to that?
Sir, we agree with all of GAO's recommendations with regards to securing the cities. With regard to the electrical grid, that would be my colleagues at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I know they have spent a great deal of time on that and are working on hardening that, but I'd have to defer to those colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKean. Ms. Callahan, as you mentioned in your testimony, CBRN threats present dynamic challenges to the nation's security. And, quote, the risks are constantly evolving due to the evolution of technologies, quote. What steps has the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office taken to coordinate the threat with the intelligence community so that the agency might better understand the current threat environment?
Thank you, sir. As you may know, we have a dedicated intelligence shop just focused on CBRN threats. They do an annual report that we're happy to brief to you and to your staff, the CWMD Homeland Threat Assessment. We work very closely with our intelligence community colleagues. We also are having a fledgling relationship with the National Guard Bureau and their intelligence shop, again, to get that information out to the first responders, to the folks in the field in the 57 different, for example, civil support teams. So trying to get that information out. We're also working with our colleagues, health security, among others, at analyzing the risk. So we've identified the threat, but we've also looked at the risk, which include the likelihood as well as the consequent and what the impact is. So we're trying to have a holistic view.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And what's your interaction regularly with Customs and Border Patrol to make sure that our ports of entry, so that they have the information necessary to make sure that they can protect us as best they can?
Yep, obviously CBP is one of our biggest stakeholders. We support the radiation portal monitor, so almost 1,400 RPMs at the ports of entries. We also go and brief them on threats. We've done multiple trainings, not only at ports of entries, but also at the National Targeting Center for that as well.
Okay. Your testimony also speaks to chemical preparedness and chemical defense and mentions the establishment of the DHS Chemical Coordination Group to, quote, meet the evolving threat for chemical attacks and incidents. How has the expiration of CIS's Chemical Facilities Anti-Terrorism Standards program affected our nation's chemical defense posture?
Yes, thank you, sir. The termination of CFAT's authorization, I know that's wrong phrasing, but the end of CFAT's authorization has, in my opinion, affected our chemical readiness with regard to identifying threats that would be in chemical facilities. CFATs and CWMD are siblings, and they work together closely, and we are missing them in this whole of government threat.
And I know we briefly touched upon this in my first round of questioning, but I think it's important because I think in a lot of federal agencies, especially when it comes to our enforcement agencies, Homeland Security, Customs and Border Patrol, Capitol Police, attrition and making sure that our workforce stays is a concern that we have. So in 2022, there was a ranking by best places to work, and the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office ranked 430 out of 432. 430 out of 432. CWMD has consistently has had low ratings. I know that we talked about this briefly, but I think it's extremely important. So you, I think, have had identified in some cases why morale is so low. Is there anything that you weren't able to share in the first round of questioning? And if we can go into, because we have a little bit more time, what the steps that you are taking to improve the morale to make sure that we keep our coworkers staying where they are, because I think institutional knowledge is something that is so important. So what are we doing to make sure that they stay and are enjoying working for this great government?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Retention is crucial, and it's incredibly important, particularly for something as complex as CBRN threats. And we're working in multiple ways. I mentioned my kind of 3 tiers of my morale plan. I won't rehash that, but I will say that we're looking for opportunities to cross-train, to have people work within the different directorates. What's interesting to me is that we've because they came from different organizations, that in some ways they might not have known the other side of the CB and the RN threat. So we're looking at ways to integrate that better. We're doing presentations on what we're doing. We're looking to look for those synergies that were there but hadn't been focused on yet. And so, sir, I think it's professional development, I think it's office development, and it's candidly just getting to know us as people. We lost a lot of that during COVID, and we're trying to find ways to connect in a hybrid environment.
Okay, so I guess we're both confident that the next time Best Places to Work does their rankings will be far better than 430.
Sir, I will say the FEVs are a lagging indicator, and that it could be possible that the FEV scores during my time may come out, after I leave, depending on the election. And so I want to say, I'm not here about FEV scores. I'm here about the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm still confident. I'm rooting for you.
I appreciate the vote of support, and I also share that vote.
All right, my time's expired. Now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I suspect that when we have the security of knowing that people will get a paycheck, that will also have morale to go up, because government should not run from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. We should have the security of people knowing that their government and the full faith and credit of their government will always be protected. So we will continue to fight to make sure that happens, so you're able to do your job even more. So Representative Strong touched on a point that I wanted to go. So Secretary Callahan, can you tell the subcommittee where CWMD is advancing in its biodetection capabilities?
Thank you very much, sir. As I mentioned, BioWatch is a reliable program right now, but we have to improve on it. As Dr. Juan Sherman said, we've got to make sure that we have a shorter time period, if possible, with the same level of standard of clarity and of accuracy. We have looked at many opportunities. I'm happy to talk about BD21, but I'll put that to a side right now because it's an acquisition program. But we're looking at making a series of incremental improvements on environmental biodetection writ large. And that's our focus, rather than kind of to jump to the BD21 moonshot, so to speak. And that's one of the reasons BD21 couldn't scale and it couldn't be operational at this moment. But instead, we're looking at a wide range of technologies, opportunities, and resources to have the BioWatch steady state while we work on incremental improvements in terms of timeliness, response, efficiency, and so on.
Are we keeping up with the bad guys?
We are working our darnest to keep up with the bad guys. As Dr. Juan Sherman said, biodetection at scale is really hard, and it's one of the reasons why BioWatch is the only program that we have right now. But we're engaging our state and local stakeholders to make sure we're meeting their mission and their mark as we look to make these improvements on biodetection. But biodetection is hard. Bioattacks are also hard, I will say, and stop there in this room.
It's an incredible challenge. So those are not trick questions. They're questions that,
Understood, sir.
one, we understand and appreciate the difficult tasks that you have. So we'll begin there. So the questions we ask, we come in peace on how we can better serve you.
Understood,
So you
sir.
can better serve us. So what's your approach? You mentioned stakeholders. What's your approach to collect information, data, and to learn from, and more importantly, teach local stakeholders in what relationship, and what does that look like?
Yep. So first, our relationship with stakeholders are paramount. That's our crucial element. We are an operational support component supporting the 5 DHS operational supports, as well as all the state and locals that we've talked about. I have people on my team who communicate with state and locals every day to make sure we're transparent, we know what's going on, we're communicating. With regard to the GAO recommendations on data, I was thrilled to see that because it's very consistent with my philosophy, is that we have to have metrics, we have to have consistent metrics, and we have to have repeatable processes. We also have the opportunity to learn from each other. One of the things that I witnessed when I went to the Securing the Cities meeting in Miami, which was the one after the chairman came to St. Elizabeth's, is that the state and locals are learning from each other. They're sharing information. They're supporting each other. They're going and saying, this is my best practice. This is how I work. Boston came down to New Orleans to support for Mardi Gras, and New Orleans is going up to support for the marathon next month. And working together and having the information sharing is crucial in order to have this layered defense that we've established.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Dr. Sherman, what has GAO's report found regarding CWMD stakeholder outreach and engagement with SLTT partners?
Yeah, absolutely. So both with Securing the Cities, as well as actually BioWatch, and also the former Chemical Defense Demonstration Cities Initiative, we had previously found that the communication and engagement with stakeholders, not only at the federal level, but the SLTT partners, was not as robust as it could have been. We have seen strides, which is very positive. There have been a lot of gatherings, meetings, sharing of information, and really, kind of an understanding that one participant in a program can learn from another. We also know in 2022, there was an SLTT engagement strategy that CWMD developed. We made some recommendations on how to improve that, but it was noticeable that they had pulled the strategy together. And so we were pleased to have seen that. Ranking Member, if you'll indulge me, I don't have an answer to the question regarding a blank check, but I will say, since we haven't dabbled in it, something to keep me up at night would be the role of AI, or the potential when it comes to producing CBRN, CBRN threats. That is something that, of course, is part of the executive order. Will be implemented. DHS is going to be developing an analysis to take a look at that issue. GAO is starting to monitor the efforts within that executive order. And so I'm a little less scared at night because I know we're going to take a look at it, but that is an area, of concern moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Sherman. My time is up. Mr. Chairman, if you would just indulge me one quick final question for Dr. Wolf. Same question on engagement. As we prepare for the next health security risk, share with us your method or matrix for engagement with other agencies to ensure that we have the best practices in place.
Sure, Ranking Member. I'm from the Northeast, so I'll talk fast on this one. The first, with our other federal partners, we are the supporting agency to ESF8, which is the lead as HHS. And when you're a supporting agency, we need to do a better job. So the last few years of the creation of OHS, we've done a better job of being a solid partner for HHS ASPR and HHS CDC. We also sit on the FEMC, which is the Public Health Emergency Medical Countermeasures Enterprise. That is how the federal interagency decides what medical countermeasures we should develop and invest in, certainly related to Assistant Secretary Callahan's comment about BioWatch, right? We're detecting to treat, detecting to warn. We want to make sure we're leveraging medical countermeasures. Don't want to detect something and then not have a treatment for someone in New Orleans or somewhere else. In terms of state and local, a few things we do is we convene monthly with the fusion centers, and we make sure that health analysts are understanding what's happening in the law enforcement mission. What we find a lot of times is health people tend to be called when the problem is known, so we're making sure that the fusion centers are leveraging their health analysts prior to any issue that arises. The other thing we do is we convene communities along the southwest border and interior communities to talk about challenges they are seeing across the community, whether that is with migrants, whether that is just state and local issues that they're devoting money from one program to another. And the last thing we do is we've got the food security mission. We've done several tabletops, one in the state of Washington, one in Oklahoma, and both of those had good representation from the tribes, which is one of our focal points for 2024, which is, as we know from COVID-19, for example, a lot of focus on Navajo Nation and making sure that we're including, when we say SLTT, that we don't forget the tribal part of our state and locals. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask that the witnesses respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, this subcommittee stands adjourned.